Ron DeSantis has, of course, not officially declared that he is running for president yet. However, last week he went to Iowa, and the only reason to do that is if you're running for president. But Ron DeSantis has a problem. See, he has no real policies to speak of. He doesn't have an environmental policy. He doesn't have an economic policy. He doesn't even actually have an education policy other than don't teach CRT or we're going to throw you in jail. So he's got nothing to stand on other than his anti-woke agenda. And according to a new poll, most people in this country, a majority of them, actually like so-called woke. We read this. According to a new poll conducted by Ipsos and published last week in USA Today, very reliable, shows that 56% of Americans consider woke a positive term, meaning to be informed, educated on, and aware of social injustices. Only 39% agreed with the negative definition of to be overly politically correct and police others' words. So a majority of people in this country look at woke, Florida, as DeSantis says, where woke goes to die, and people are like, but I like woke. I don't want woke to die. Woke just means that you're not a closed-minded moron, which I think that's a pretty damn good definition. So DeSantis taking his little national anti-woke show on the road, not exactly resonating with voters. In fact, as MSNBC host Donnie Deutsch pointed out, what a joyless character Ron DeSantis is. What a dour, sour, nasty, mean, and if you go back in history through every election, usually the candidate you want to have a beer with versus the other one is the one who wins. The one you want to have a cup of coffee, the one you want to invite to your living room. This is a very obnoxious, nasty, as you use the word, cruel man. He continues, I get more to that in a minute, but think about that. He's right, because that's the question we always say, who would you want to have a beer with? That was the big thing in the George W. Bush election versus Al Gore. Al Gore was stuffy and studious. I don't want to have a beer with him. George W. Bush looks like the kind of guy who's going to put a lampshade on his head and dance without a shirt on the bar. That's going to be fun. We want to have a beer with him. They did the same thing with John Kerry versus George W. Bush. The same question was posed with Obama and John McCain. Even Trump and Hillary. And that's the truth. I'm sorry, as stupid as he is, people do go back to that, who would you want to sit down and have a beer with? And I don't think anybody wants to have a beer with Ron DeSantis. But Deutsch continued. You have average Americans worried about banks and getting their money. You'll say the reason this happened is because of wokeness. That doesn't work. People have a BS detector, and I think as this campaign starts to get heated up and as people see more and more of Ron DeSantis, they'll see that cruel is a losing formula. Because that's all Ron DeSantis has is the cruelty. The attacks on other people, other lifestyles, other ethnicities. When you look at the economic situation down here in the state of Florida, which I've pointed out a dozen times, it sucks. So that's why he focuses on the culture war issues. He, like every other Republican in this country, doesn't know how to actually govern. And I'm not saying that as an attack on Republicans. I'm telling you literally, they don't know how to do the actual job. They're very bad at economics. They're very bad at math. They're very bad at education. So they don't do anything with that other than the culture war crap because they know they're going to make it worse and then suddenly they got to pay the price with the voters. So if they just focus on culture war BS, they can keep the base angry enough about critical race theory or drag performances to the point where they don't notice that their home is being foreclosed upon. That's what they hope. And for a while, it can absolutely work. But not forever. And that's the problem Ron DeSantis has out there with the rest of the country. Yes, he plays well in the state of Florida, but the rest of the country views him as mean, cruel, nasty, stupid. Not the guy you want to have a beer with, the guy that you never want to hear from ever again. And that is not a winning formula for a presidential campaign. If you can't get enough Ring of Fire, we encourage everyone to subscribe to our channel for fresh video content 7 days a week. And for even more from me, you can follow me on all social media outlets, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at fair and balanced.